I don't like talking on a mic because I don't like the way I sound, but now they're saying I should capitalize on slang and the way I speak, so maybe I'll start podcasting. But, for me, I hit record and I'm a minute into it. I have nothing to say. So having said all that, I have a passion for this space, new media in general, podcasting, video blogging. I think it's really cool that we're all here at this point in time because as far along as it's came in the last couple of years, it really hasn't even gotten started yet. There's going to be a lot of new innovations coming out with the new Nokia phones and video blogging and live streaming, things like that. It would just be commonplace, taken for granted. So I think, I don't know, at this time we can talk about the Fishbowl a little bit. What's like some of your perceptions on like the first time that you heard about this space? Did you just think, hey, this is really cool, let's go check it out? Or is it more of a like self-motivated, we could use this in our curriculum? Or kind of how did that, not to put you on the spot, but
right.
To start there.
Really, it was just like, well, what is a podcast? So I initially thought I didn't really know it was about subscribing and getting a feed like that until later, but I thought it was mainly like having a website that had some audio component, video component. And so I started from that direction, and then it's true that all of the little words and things are very hard to have it all straight.
A lot of terminology
Right.
going on. Yeah, like we talked about RSS feeds and feed aggregators, but really a lot of people, the general public, is still used to going to a site, bookmarking the site, going back there maybe on a daily or weekly basis to check for new stuff. So where we're like thinking, we're in the fishbowl going, yeah, but everybody's got a feed, you got to have a feed. It's like, well, no, you don't really. You got to make it easy for everybody else to come and find your content. And it's really difficult to keep that in perspective. I think for a lot of people.
Most of the podcasts I'm listening to, I do not go through iTunes for them. I mean, I've either heard about them or I've clicked on to a few of them and then I've seen what some of the comments are and then I followed it back and all of that I'm using Google Reader for most of my podcasts because it's quicker. It doesn't take as long and so I like it.
My iTunes, you know how it'll stop downloading after you start listening? It's like all of them.
Yeah.
And it's quit. Because I just don't. I'll go to the site as I think about wanting to hear the episode. So, anybody else kind of coming into this as a new perspective?
I'm coming into it totally new, and it was just because November was when I went from just doing graphics to doing graphic web again, and quite honestly, podcasts, we want to be connected up with it. That's where technology is right now, that's where people are looking. And my experience with podcasts has been more when somebody says, oh, there's a really neat podcast here, give you the productions and just connect up and do it. The one thing that turns me off on it, if I can't get it loaded fast, I won't bother watching it.
Which is one of the reasons I switched to Google because on most of the things, it strips out all the graphics, gets you down, and if they've got it set up right, they'll put a little player right there in the box, and the Google Reader will let you play it if you want you there, or you can go visit the site.
Yeah.
Well, it's like a lot of the aggregators. You can have those set up so they're going out every once a day, every hour, whatever, and you can have some set up. They'll automatically download those, so you don't have to be sitting there. If you've got a computer running, you might come in and find out, oh look, you downloaded 3 new podcasts for you, but they're all downloaded, ready for you to listen to. So you don't have to actually go out and hit the sites or have to make the effort. Say, I want to listen to it now, but I have to download it first. It's just nice to have them there, so you just ready for if you want to put them on an iPod, an MP3 player, just listen to them right there on the computer.
Joel, what aggregators do you use? Would you consider Google, I'm assuming?
Google Reader is one of the ones
Yeah.
that I use.
Okay.
I don't use that so much for podcasts. That's mainly just for these
Everything.
other
Yeah.
40, 50, 100, whatever feeds that I just look at
Right.
the stories. But there's a lot of different ones out there. It depends on the platform you're on. There's tons of them.
What's an example of something that would automatically download
iTunes.
besides iTunes? Juice. There's DopplerRadio.net. Firebird.
Yeah, even just, Firefox Mozilla has the live bookmarks,
Oh,
which
okay.
you can actually do the feed and actually give you all
That one doesn't download.
Wouldn't download.
Office 2008 Outlook will download podcasts for you.
97, I think.
In Windows, I used to use, I'm trying to remember, I'd have to look it up again. I've gone Linux, so I use iPodder, which is kind of like the juice for Linux. But I know there was a really nice one. I'd have to look it up. There's a really good Windows one that allows you to. Especially the important part about the aggregators, if you're going to go for a separate aggregator to download things, make sure you get one that can handle OPML feeds. It's part of the jargon that you ladies are starting to learn, right? Because if you can get one that imports OPML feeds and exports your OPML feeds, that's essentially backing up your fix on podcasts. I mean, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have Ed telling me what the weather's going to be like every morning, and so that's the first thing I listen to when I get in the car, and it's when I'm getting my coffee and get ready to get in the car, figure out what code I should put on and things like that, and I have this certain order of things, of course, being shell scripted, and it puts everything in the right order for me of how I want to do my regular stuff. People mentioned they blog and they failed. I used to blog very successfully until I started listening to podcasts, and now it's like consumed my life, and I don't blog anymore because I'm too busy listening to podcasts and thinking, I should blog something about that I'd never get around to. But there's several of them there, and if you can do that, then if you ever do have a problem, you've got your whole list of feeds, and you can just import them into the next player and have a...
With Microsoft Vista, they have a new sync software. And basically that sync software, if it's a card, MP3 player, it doesn't matter what it is. If you tell it to look in a directory, as soon as something new is added there, it adds it to that device. So at night, I have it set up to download the podcast that I want, leave the device plugged in. In the morning, unplug it and go on, get in the car, plug it into the radio and go.
So to keep the fishbowl, do you guys understand what an aggregator is? It's just a piece of software. It's an application. And a subscription just means go and check out here every hour, every day, and see if there's anything new. And if there is, go ahead and bring it in. It prevents you from having to go back to the page. The problem that I find is that you subscribe to so many different shows. If you guys, first of all, you run out of hard drive space because downloading 20, 30 million shows every time somebody calls you, right? So then there's this trade-off going on. Maybe I'll unsubscribe from everybody and put it on the hard drive. Or maybe, it's a constant battle to figure out actually what system works best for you. So I think we've all flip-flopped between using an aggregator to going to the site, to using iTunes. Google Reader is kind of cool because nothing's downloaded.
Now keep in mind also with stuff like iTunes and stuff like that, it will delete shows you've already listened to. You say I want to keep the last 3 episodes of a show, and then it'll delete after that. So
and that's exactly what I do. I keep it down to one new show, and because of course like everybody else from a billion different podcasts.
Well, iTunes is a digital audio recorder. I mean, when you're done, save the last 5 episodes. And it just automatically deletes when the next one comes in. Hopefully you've listened to it.
Yeah, it's a lot like TiVo.
Yeah.
Of course, then there's like people like Robert Scoble, who A-list blogger, I guess, and he claims to read 600 feeds a day. Of course, he has 6,000 friends too. That's going to be a good party. I'll get invited. So I mean, there's extremes. So what else? What else is
You talked a little bit about cross promoting on the different using social network to to promote your podcast. Is Twitter your favorite for that, or what other things are you? I mean, are you going to Facebook? Have you set up groups? I mean, I get.
I have a group on Facebook.
and talk a little bit about that in my session actually.
Oh, are you? Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
That's good, all right.
Yeah,
I think I'm gone this afternoon. So.
Social network. Right? I mean, there's like 8 applications that you have to run because we're all on Twitter, we're all on Facebook, LinkedIn. You kind of hang out at Jaiku, kind of counts, you maintain a presence, but nobody ever checks that kind of stuff. Friendster was a year ago. A year from now, it would have been Seasman. So there's always like a core of like 8 things that you use to get your word out. when I've been on Twitter since October of '06, and I used to blog more. My blogs are kind of just whatever I'm thinking. And I don't feel like I have to do one every day. But when I started on Twitter, it dropped off even more. Because in my mind, I'm micro-blogging.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm doing. And if you really want to find out, then go a couple pages back to what I said yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I got home last night and I did like 30 Twitter updates, catching up with 800 people. But my click-through ratio, for your question, when people would put in, I just put this podcast out, or I blog about this, I would click. So I had like 100% click-through for a long time. And now Twitter's kind of growing a little bit more, and a lot of people will like follow you, and you go look at their profile, and they haven't even done anything. Or they'll have like 2,000 that they're following, and 2 people follow them back. So it's almost like now it's gone a little bit more mainstream, and like the other crowd's coming in.
It's got that typical social network burnout.
Exactly. I think there's like a core group of us. It's like 6,000 to 10,000 people at any given time, and we always flock to the latest shiny object, which is great because then we make a loud enough noise. Global blogs about it. TechCrunch gets it. It's dug on, and then mainstream media picks it up. So there's like 2 skips. There's us coming in, hey, this is really cool, or this sucks, or whatever. And if that creates a big enough ripple, then it's going to survive because that bigger crowd, mainstream people, every day come in and then they make it go away. But by the time they get to it, we're like, that's last year.
Mm-hmm.
So
Do you think Twitter will suffer the same fate that Facebook is getting right now?
if I had to predict on Twitter, my prediction on Twitter is, first of all, we're all hooked. It's up and down, and when it's down, we're like, oh, fix Twitter. But somebody's going to come along with a similar service that works 24/7, and we don't care. We're going to go use that service. The loyalty on the online services, you'll get loyalty when the next group of people come.
I think a lot having to do with any social networking site really is the people that you connect to. If your friends are there, you're going to stay there. That's why everybody is kind of dealing with all the chaos of Twitter as they're trying to deal with all the scale issues.
Well, I think one of the things that appeals about Twitter, I haven't used it, I've looked at it, I've used it a little bit, but I know it's simpler than Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
There's not
Absolutely.
10,000 messages when I log in saying, you've received 9,000 zombie message invites. You want to get started in it.
This is very true.
And I'm
So
looking and
true.
going, I don't even know half of you people.
Right.
Facebook, the initial skip is over. I blogged about it a couple weeks ago. I said, what's up with Facebook? And at most, everybody says, I don't go there.
I have a little newbie question. What happens to all the old files or bad files? Blogging the world's most boring blog. No one ever looks at it. It's been sitting out there for 3 years. Does the server drop it after a certain time?
Depends on who's picked it up. Google will never let me. Once Google has a hold of it, they'll buy more hard drives. Google is the internet.
Podcast that I created two and a half years ago for a nonprofit organization that I haven't done anything with for 2 years show up in my Google search every day. Now, what would cause something that I published 2.5 years ago to suddenly pop up today? I don't know. Whether the people maintaining that website moved it around or something, or linked to it in some other article. I mean, I have no idea.
Because at some point it gets too massive. When you do this at Google search, how often do you look beyond the first 3 pages?
And you also have to kind of wonder, too, with Twitter, it's a very casual thing. I unsubscribe from people who only use it to say, come look at my new thing. I like hearing that you took your dog for a walk, and oh yeah, by the way, I published an article. But I don't ever say, oh my God, I'm so drunk, or oh, I hate my husband so much today, because I know somewhere that's going to live out there forever, even if I go back and delete it.
It is an interesting point to bring up for you two ladies, where it's essentially connected with your employment, where you're interested in. My wife is with an organization within the Missouri educational kind of system, working with high schools, professional development for teachers, and they're looking at podcasting also. there's kind of a different level there than there is. Joel and I happen to work for the same company, okay? You will never, ever hear me mention anything specific to that company on my personal podcast. You're never going to hear me talk about the name of my company. You'll hear about me traveling to another city and going there on business, and you'll know that I have a client in Baltimore, but you'll never hear the name of that client, because you really should assume that anything you put out there on the internet will stay there forever.
I got
and it may haunt you.
Perfect example
forever.
for it. This is just within the last 2 months.
Uh-huh.
We had opening your group, saw a resume come in, and they got all stuff, and this guy put his email address on this thing. And I'm looking at this going, it has nothing to do with his name. I'm looking at this thing going, why is that familiar? All of a sudden I'm out there going, I've seen that person on Twitter. I'm not following. It's somebody she knows on Twitter, so I'm out there. I start going, I started looking back. Found he was already at the same company. He only been there for 6 months. I'm like, well, how can he apply for us? Because he can't do that. And then went back and found all these little tweets that he put out there, griping about his boss, griping about the company, all this stuff. And I'm looking at some of the stuff he's putting out there. I was like, ooh, that was a mistake. So we're looking at this. All of a sudden, I'm telling my boss, I'm like, here's a little. Go look at some of these things out here. You might want to.
And there are a lot of employers that do that
You
now.
can give me the answer I was hoping for. Now, as more people get into the podcasting technology, we're going to get some of the works from the horrible stuff. I personally am never responsible for some of that. Because people will say, oh, we're giving a lecture that I think we should do as a podcast. I'm just like, if they didn't care enough to show up at the lecture, they're not going to lecture for years to come.
I was talking to Brady about this at the last session. With podcasting, we're at that point where websites and the internet were 1995, 96. Everybody realizes they ought to be doing it. The tools are cheap or they're free, and they're getting easier and easier to use. And that means that anyone can be a journalist. Anybody can be a filmmaker. It also means, just like there were this blossom of the ugliest, most useless websites in the late 90s that you could possibly imagine. Some of them paid for with big money, and a lot of them, here's my website about my dog. There are some really good news podcasts. There are some really bad social media applications. There's just a lot of garbage on Facebook. But at the same time, you sift through that, and there are a lot of treasures. And if you podcast your lectures and you blog all of your scholarly research, there's going to be a lot of stupid stuff to sift through. But it enables me in Iowa to go look at the engineering school and see a cool project that you did that'll inspire my kids to do a cool project that otherwise I wouldn't find, because I'm not going to get in the car and drive up to Lawrence and goof around at the engineering school. So even if you think it's going to be dumb,
People that are hosting the podcast had something in place to drop it after a certain amount of time. So like with websites, now that everybody can load a website, there's a lot of really bad websites.
but there's a lot of hard stuff that if it costs $10,000 to make a website, I wouldn't be able to do it, but because I can do it cheaper for you, maybe I'll have something that'll have a gem of really good content that'll be interesting to you. And even if you think nobody's going to listen to my podcast, you'd be shocked to find, there might not be that many people in Lawrence that are into what you're into, but worldwide, there are lots of Star Trek enthusiasts who speak Klingon who are really into knitting 8-bit characters from video games, and you'll find you have a following.
Even if another way to look at it, some of the hosting companies, you wonder, why is this stuff still out here? Because somebody's still paying that company for the space. If it's not being downloaded, then it's not coming off the bandwidth. The hosting provider's actually making more on that because all they're doing is providing this space for it. So they just look at it, hey, we're still getting paid for it. They don't care.
The other thing to think about is the Wayback Machine indexes everything on the web. And that, even if I deleted my website from 10 years ago, the Wayback Machine indexes it, and it's there forever. I mean, I guess not forever, but until I mean, once you post it on the web, you should assume it's going to be there until the internet's gone.
They meant you should go one step further. Once you put it in a digital form. I was part of FidoNet, which is beyond most of your ages.
Oh,
a long
I
time
never
ago.
heard of that.
And something I wrote is now on the internet that I know I never put on the internet as part of FidoNet, but it's still there because some guy saved it. And then when he got the opportunity to make a website, it went out.
It's not necessarily a bad thing, longevity, because if you publish a lecture next week, and in 5 years from now, a kid in Australia discovers the internet and watches the lecture, that could spark something in him, but because he wasn't able to go to the lecture from the wallet given at the time, and so you never know, what's going to happen, or who's going to see it. But a lot of them will probably have people that come up 2 years later and say, hey, I was listening, or I just got, when I was listening to all your early episodes, I listened to all 800 of them, back to back. And you're like, first of all, step away. But, so having it all out there, at any given time, it could be a good thing. If it was quality content to begin with. Now, the skateboarding dog and all that stuff, YouTube's been with it forever.
Well, sometimes though, the concept of whether it's quality content depends on who the listeners are. I mean, I've seen some podcast things that I've listened to that 2 minutes in, I'm like, I gotta stop, this is awful. And then you go out there and find that they've got, 4,000 weekly listeners, and you're like, who are these people? A lot of this you don't really know until you put something out there, and a lot of the main thing is you gotta make sure it's something you're interested in.
If you're passionate about it, somebody else will be too, and they'll listen to your podcast. And even those professors at your school, they were passionate about history or economics or whatever it is that is their discipline. And those professors, you'll get downloads like crazy because people can hear the enthusiasm. And there's somebody out there who's interested in it, no matter what it is.
Well, and not everybody can afford to go to college, so,
I'm really
you can
excited.
educate those who can't even afford to go.
There's a lot of really interesting stuff that's online.
2 years ago, I took a trip to South Africa, and I made the mistake of not taking my laptop with me because at the time I couldn't get enough information to tell me whether or not I'd have connection wherever I was going. So I get there and I find out that South Africa has next to no wired internet connection anywhere. Wireless everywhere, and it's through their telephone network, their cell phone network. They have internet everywhere. And we get to this place where my wife is going to be seeing me, and their library consists of like 8 books on the shelf and 12 computers. That was their connection to the world, was those 12 computers that all had cell phone cards stuck in them. For $30 a month, you could buy a cell phone card, stick it in, and have unlimited access. And that's a great reason for it to keep going. I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere. We were out in Kruger National Park, and the guy that was our tour guide was allowing me to check my email while sitting there watching gazelles walk by. And I'm just sitting there, and it was because that was their way of communicating in South Africa, was that connection. And the schools that had no other option for books, we ended up sending back a bunch of books, but I can guarantee you those books are totally useless for the most part, more than that internet connection was. And so the new media ability to reach those spots where there isn't the tangible is probably something not to forget about.
It's probably more cost effective too. The fact that it's all on a computer that costs $1,000 instead of having a huge building for a library and all this.
More up to date too.
Yeah, it's more up to
You've
date.
got books. I mean, when a book is a year old, depending on what the content was,
Well, the day it's
it may
published.
not. It's dated. As soon as it's published, you're starting to date it. So you've got the internet out there, and people can keep up with what's the latest going on with any subject you could ever think of out there.
I guess my concern is just the volume that is going, and it's storing extra money. It's like, I would have some, you guys would say, I'm writing down, that's cool, I'm gonna check Mr. Gadget, and all that. Just for social networking, I think the volume is gonna get harder and harder to find the areas you're interested in. The people that, maybe someone's trying to really meet that.
That's the bad of it. People are hopping around from place to place to place, and so this place gets abandoned, but like even Friendster is like really popular, not here anymore, but there's other countries that people are all over And so you think it's abandoned because nobody here uses it. Well, maybe somebody else someplace else uses it.
And with a podcast, what you can do, I mean, your podcast is out there. Anyone who's using any sort of social networking, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Friendster, if you're on MySpace, or whatever you're on, you've got a widget that can pull that content in, or you have an aggregator reader. So your content will never be dead, even if everybody that you know is pulling it in from Facebook. It doesn't matter. I mean, when they move to the next one, it won't matter because your content will still go. So that's the wonderful thing about the podcast versus maybe creating it just for Facebook or creating it just for MySpace. Wherever they go, they can take it with them, and you don't have to worry about trying to go out and find them.
And I think with the amount of volume of content that's out there right now and the stuff that will be out there, it becomes even more important where word of mouth is the way to find things. That's why sites like Dig have taken off, where here's an interesting news story. Oh, look, 2,000 people think this is an interesting story. Maybe I should check that out. Mm-hmm. So word of mouth is enormous right now, and that's really, if you want to say the biggest benefit of social networking and being involved in that is that word of mouth ability.
I would also encourage, when we talk about promoting your podcast, to not solely focus on social networking. Like Michael mentioned, how many people are on Friendster this week and how many will there be next week? When you're talking about promoting a podcast, do simple stuff like, if you're trying to promote your podcast, put it in your signature on your email. You go,
business cards.
Yeah, business cards. Business cards, a great way to go. Go to forums. My wife does a yoga blog, and she does yoga stuff, so she'll get involved in forums. Go to other bloggers, because if you're talking about Friendster, there's only 10,000, 15, even 20,000. It's a pretty small amount when you start talking about the percentage of people that are online. And somebody has to be on Twitter for you to reach them. I would encourage you, if you're trying to promote, don't necessarily focus on social networking.
One of the things that was interesting, you're talking about, there's so many social networks out there. Which ones do you get on? Well, when you start getting on these social networks, that's where you actually start finding out about all the new ones and where people are going. So sometimes it's a little intimidating. Where do I go? Well, start picking the ones you hear about first. And actually, as you start building up that social network, you'll start finding out the trends. You'll find out the new places. And what's nice is you hear about something new, and kind of like what Ed was talking about, suddenly everybody on Twitter, is all seeing this, or Facebook. You start getting all their opinions. So you know the different people that you start making friends with out there that you know, and right away you hear about something new out there, but then right away all the people you're friends with all jump out there. Everybody hates it. It's great. They've just done the review for it. You might not necessarily need to go there. So even though it's intimidating and you don't know which social networks to go, you almost need to get into some of these social networks just to find out where everybody's going, what the different trends are, and you start finding out all the stuff, right away, and then you actually can get a good feel from all the people that you start to network with.
Well, you got to start somewhere. Once you start somewhere, you kind of build a community there. You tend to go where your friends are. I have the same people that are on Twitter that may be on Facebook. That if they all went to MySpace, and most people left Facebook, I'd probably use MySpace more because that's where they all are. I'll make separate connections maybe in different social networks, but that same group of people is usually the ones that I've really connected with. And even if I've never met them in person, I know about their spouse and their kids and their dogs and their fish and their websites. And you kind of connect with them on that internet level only. That if you saw them in person, and we've had recent meetups where we just met people, it's like you knew them because you've been following them online. So then you kind of just follow them.
Well, Chris has been out there. I mean, she's been on these social networks for a long time, and so people find her stuff, and then her and I are friends on Twitter. So those people are finding me. So now I'm starting to meet them because they're following me. I'm starting to follow them, and you start picking up other people. Or that's where like some of these guys find out. They pick up and find out, oh, you're doing a podcast. They'll go over and look at your website, and they might find out other things you're doing. It's just a whole big chain. But it's just kind of interesting that, someone else picks up a friend. We're going to go and look and see, well, who's this person friending? And they're going to start looking at your stuff. Where normally they might not have ever found your stuff, wasn't searching for it, but just from the social aspect, they're going out, just kind of browsing, Then they come across it, and you may find that person does have an interest in your blog or your Twitter feed, whatever you're doing, or your podcast.
And the social networks are just a tool if you're talking about podcasting.
Yes.
It's just a way to get information out on a timely basis and things like that. But in a way, and I don't know if this is going to overlap with what you're going to talk about later, Ed, I mean, in a way, I know a lot of podcasters are very effective at turning their podcast almost into a social network. They have online streaming of video while they're recording the podcast. Every Sunday night, I'm in watching Chuck and Craig doing Chuck Chat, and they're both on camera, and people are sitting there making comments while they're listening to them actually recording the podcast that they all know they're going to listen to later on in the week, edited up. And there's a lot of the guys that I follow that are doing that. You can be online and chatting with each other. Those are the people I follow on Twitter. Your K7 feedback loop almost forms, some of these guys have whole shows that they make out of people calling in, commenting on their show. This is probably what I'm the most infamous for, is calling in on shows. You guys call the time. I may be the only person who calls Ed Roberts. But,
At least regularly, yes.
I call him on a regular basis and make comments on stuff. I call him on the phone and say, you should go outside and look at these clouds. It is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I don't know if you got out there in time. But, people start calling into you and you start playing those, and then somebody else calls in and comments on the comment, and you draw people in, and there's this interest because your users are contributing back into the process. This is a very much where it's not just you, and if you are alone, then there is somebody else you're talking to, because somebody else is talking to you back through the phone or through the email, and then you respond back to that. So
that's exactly kind of what I've been thinking this whole time. Is you're never alone. Nobody in this world is solely interested in whatever it is. Now, they might be in Australia, they might be in Poland, they might be in Czech Republic or Iceland. But as long as they have an internet connection,
They're right next door.
they're right next door. And so you can connect with people that you'd never be able to connect to if you didn't have the internet. And so it's worth putting your content out there. Even if it's a niche group that's just 9, 10 people, it's worth it because you connected with 9 or 10 people that are interested in what you're interested in. And so that right there makes it all worth it. Whether you spend 2 hours editing your audio down so it sounds good and everything, and only 5 people see it, it's a little disheartening. But if it's niche enough, if it's something that, only a certain number of people are going to really enjoy, if they start talking back, that instantly makes it worth it.
But they may only be that 5 right now.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we all talked about when we went around was everybody that had a Twitter, almost all of that Twitter was connected to some other social network. And it's that branding aspect. That's the quickest way to social network, is to always use the same email address or the same prefix.
So true.
And my name is long. It's Jeffrey P. Harrington. And anybody who knows me now knows how to find me. If you type Jeffrey P. Harrington at most of the major emails, you'll end up getting to me. And it was something that I decided to make a constant. And when I started the Amish phone book, I let Google run all of the email because they do it for free. And so if you send email to anything with the Amish phone book, it's going to go to my Google account, and Google posts it all. 6 gigs now, roughly, and keeps growing. And so I don't think I've deleted email in 3 years now. So
But you make a very good point, and it's one that I learned as I was going through here, because when I first started off, I was doing the Kansas City Weather podcast, everything I did was branded KC Weather. Well, then I started getting involved a little bit more in podcasting. I started my other podcast. Well, all of a sudden, no one knew who I was, but they knew me as KC Weather. So suddenly, there's these other podcasts out there, and they have no connection to me. So I had to be very deliberate in rebranding myself as Ed Roberts.
I knew you did KC Weather, but I didn't know you did the other 3.
Yeah.
Is it 2 or 3 now?
Well,
3 total.
Yeah, 3 total.
Yeah, and see, I didn't know that until last night.
Mm-hmm.
See, and I'm so new at it that I know you as Ed Roberts.
Yeah,
And I
see.
know you as Casey Weather.
You've gotten
So
to that
I've
point
got to
where I've
rebrand.
already rebranded
Yeah,
myself.
yeah.
To
But-
yourself.
Yeah, and when I first started out, I didn't imagine doing anything except for, doing my weather show. And I got a little more involved, and suddenly, my brand is now my name. And I think that's something that you always have to keep in mind when you're getting involved in social media.